Nonprofit and philanthropic leaders devote their lives to the service of others, but sometimes they need a little help. Kristine Michie has been deep in the work and the play of helping changemakers grow their impact for decades. So whether you're ladling soup at a local shelter or attending a UN peace conference, you need to find the balance between the heavy work and a light touch so you don't burn out. And Kristine believes play is at the center of that. Welcome to the PlayFull Podcast, bringing fun to the serious work of changing the world.
Welcome back to the PlayFull Podcast, bringing fun to the serious work of changing the world. Today we're revisiting one of the most popular episodes, a classic rewind. This conversation first aired earlier, but the message feels just as timely now as it did then. Your host, Kristine Michie, is 5 decades into trying to make the world a better place, and in this episode, she reconnects with a movement builder who's doing meaningful work while also finding ways to rest, recharge, and stay human in the process. Let's rewind and press play on a conversation that still matters. Here's Kristine.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Well, morning here as we're recording, depending on when you're listening, whatever time of day it is. I am here today with Don Howard, the CEO and president of the James Irvine Foundation. You have reached us here at the PlayFull Podcast, where we're bringing fun to the serious work of changing the world. And we are in a civic actors series, and that's why talking to Don today is so perfect. The Irvine Foundation is a California-based and California-focused foundation, and I want to say welcome to you, Don.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Hey, Don, I got to tell you, I started my career in the nonprofit sector in 1993 as a little baby fundraiser. I'd gone to UCLA and gotten a certificate in grant writing, and I was transitioning from being a journalist. And man, Don, there's not that many. There were more now then than now, but not many foundations focused exclusively on California. And Irvine, of course, one of the preeminent. And so I can think about the how old I was then, the 20-something-year-old I was then. If you would have told me that years later I'd be talking to the CEO of the James Irvine Foundation when I was starting my fundraising career, it was like that would have been bucket list kind of thing. So here we are, even not knowing that there was a bucket back then for this.
Well, if I said that far back that I would be CEO of the James Irvine Foundation, it would have been something unimaginable to me. People ask sometimes, how do I get a job as a CEO of a foundation? And there is no direct path to doing it. So I'll share with you my story of how it happened, but it's definitely not a predictable sort of circumstance to find yourself in. And it's a privilege. It's a huge and a responsibility to deploy our resources really for the maximum impact for people in California.
Yeah, fantastic. And those that follow the podcast will know that we've been covering, a lot of really timely issues. We try and stay really current. And then in this series, to be talking about big global societal issues with people who have a lens focused on a specific geographic area and people within that area is really exciting. So I love that we're going to be talking about that, but I can't postpone some couple playful things. First of all, those that are going to see some of the video images, you're going to notice over Don's right shoulder, some things up on the wall that he showed me earlier at a close-up are all Lego statues. So let's just go ahead. I was going to say, what do you do for fun? What's something playful in your life? I think I've got some evidence of it behind you. Tell me about Legos.
Well, it starts with the fact that I have twin boys who are 12 years old. And I parented later in life. I co-parent my kids, so I'm a half-time single dad, and they are into Legos, and hence I am too. There's actually a term, it's an AFOL, adult fans of Lego.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's kind of a thing, and I find myself when I want to sort of take my mind away from the world of just doing that sort of handiwork of putting Lego bricks together and creating something. My kids get a little mad because I'll make the sets before they do, and they'll say, no, it's for all of us to do. You probably maybe could see even further behind me is another room that is fully dedicated to Legos. It is an environmental disaster full of plastic, but it chronicles kind of like, let's see, they're 12. They probably got into it at 6. So this has been an ongoing family hobby for quite a long time. And it's, it is environmentally a little insensitive, but of all the hobbies we could have, I think it's creative, it's architectural, and it's something we can share as a family.
I love it. Yeah. Tell me, if you would, about how you have found Legos to be a collaboration tool.
Well, one of my kids, who's more of our architect, will basically lay out the bricks for me and tell me where they need to go. And so we kind of collaborate on each page, each set of instructions. And while we're doing it, we'll have little family conversations, check in on how the day is going, what's on his mind, how things are happening. So it creates a little space for casual conversations. When I sit my kids down, as I do sometimes, and say, let's have a family talk, they run for cover. They're just like, I know this is going to be unpleasant and I don't want to deal with it. But you can really get into a kid's head when they're distracted doing something else and sort of hear what's going on with them. So it's both a diversion and a chance for us to connect in a kind of Zen space, which is really hard to create.
That's lovely. It makes me think about, I'm not sure where I first read or heard this, but maybe in general, but especially with, kids and adults, whether they're parents and kids or teachers and kids, sort of a side-by-side model, shoulder to shoulder, whether you're driving, walking, or working on something together can be a powerful way to kind of unleash conversation that wouldn't happen if in that other structure where maybe the power dynamic is a little more evident.
Yeah, they say, and this is pretty true, when you're driving your kids around is when you get the most candor and authenticity out of them. Every once in a while when I'm driving them and their friends around, I'll ask a question or two. But I was told the other day that I'm no longer allowed to talk to their friends when we're driving.
Oh my God, I remember that moment, Dawn. Yeah, my kids are 28 and 30. And I remember one time when my daughter said, Mom, stop hugging my friends. I was like, okay, sorry.
Did you get you have to now stop at the corner before school, and that's the last hug you get? They're not you're not allowed near the door. I'm on the board of my kids' school, and one of the events they do is they have a trustee day, and the trustees come and we have lunch with the kids. And my kids warned me in advance, do not acknowledge us if you see us. And I know where in the cafeteria so as I left, I put my hand up to sort of shield my face from them. And they said, that was even more embarrassing than if you had said hello to us.
You can't get it right.
I was like, man, if I'm putting out all this money to have kids, I should at least have some fun with it. So give me a break.
I love it. Well, just to kick off this conversation in this spirit is so it's sort of like part and parcel of the podcast, our theme and purpose, right? I kind of can only imagine, but I think I might be able to imagine a bit what's on your list of things to do today, the things you planned and have had on your mind, and the things that have even happened overnight, right? That you're going to have to address today. And I really appreciate that. One thing that's happened with the podcast that's been such a pleasant surprise is I've noticed with the guests that I thought when I started, it would be like, come on the podcast and take a break from your busy day, busy week, et cetera, and the heaviness of it. It feels like the guests, and I hope you're feeling this, it's just integrated in. You are, I've noticed in our sector, as we're under more assault than ever before, people are insisting on being able to maintain some of their joy, some of their balance in the course of the day and the week and the movement. And that's really, I think, the magic of when we look back, won't that be great, at how hard it was when it's better, we'll say that we did that well.
Well, it's interesting, the idea of looking back. I'm getting more sort of sanguine about this being the new normal. That this isn't necessarily going to revert to something that we sort of embraced before, and maybe it shouldn't. That we have to find a way to maintain some equanimity throughout. This, it's a marathon, not a sprint sort of metaphor. And I think that's true. So building in some fun in each day and taking the time to just appreciate it. I feel like since the pandemic, frankly, maybe even since 2016, I feel like I personally have been activated, like vigilant, on guard. And that's been now, 8 years, and it's going to continue. So this will be, true at least through the end of my career, and finding a way to pace myself, to have more sort of presence and in my day is just got to be part of the solution. Otherwise, you can't maintain the energy to do the work. There's a billboard I live in San Francisco in the Castro. There's a billboard that says joy is resistance.
Yeah.
And I think that's another element of this is, if I, think back, I was watching the news yesterday in levity and dark times, but there's a group of protesters in Portland that are dressed in inflatable frog outfits.
Oh.
And I thought, that is the kind of example of you've got to have fun doing it. Otherwise, you're not going to maintain your momentum. I think back to my community, I'm a gay dad. And I think back over the course of my journey and, even drag, the history of folks sort of having fun, dressing up, is sort of part of the movement for gay rights. And I think that just is a long history of building joy into resistance, and we've got to embrace that now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this echoes themes that guests have shared over this 2.5 years. Which that 2.5 years is a chunk of that 8-year period you just talked about that's been harder in different ways. And even in this 2.5 years, how things we thought were hard 2 years ago now seem like, oh, those were the good old days. And it has consistently been true that folks have shared, giving examples of. I was talking to Scott Nakagawa from 22nd Century Initiative, and he was talking about an experience he had in college and some protesters. Some kind of demagogue was coming to campus, and there was a debate about whether he or she should be able to speak, and that happened, and they came, and so there was protesting, and they came in with all this pomp and circumstance, as they do, because that kind of keeps building up their image and of seeming infallibility. And some of the protesters put sugar in the gas tanks of the motorcade. And so after the big ta-da and speech and all the rally, they couldn't leave. And, suddenly it's just like this human thing of like car problems, basically, right? And so you're talking about like pranks and then, clown costumes at a Klan rally and things like that. I mean, it's I like the inflatable frogs. So let me share with folks who aren't familiar the kind of the founding statement. And I want to ask you about this mission statement for the James Irvine Foundation. How long has this been in? How long have these been the words? Ensuring all low-income workers in California have the power to advance economically. I mean, I love nothing better than like a nice, tidy mission statement. I remember the aquarium in Monterey.
Oh, yeah.
It says inspiring conservation of the oceans. I mean, and you think about all the things they do that fit under that. So I love this. Tell me how long that's been the phrase and the focus.
So we moved to a singular focus as an institution in 2018. And that came about a couple years into my tenure. It was actually the mandate I came in with as CEO. Most foundations, as you know, have program areas that end up being kind of silos. That in my experience, I'd done a lot of consulting with foundations over the course of about 11 years that I was at a nonprofit consulting firm called the Bridgespan Group. And I came to appreciate that those silos lead to kind of a sub-optimization on kind of multiple dimensions. One is our resources are subscale to the problems as a sector, even more so as a foundation. And then if you divvy it up yet further into program areas, less likelihood, I think, you're going to have impact at scale. And then across the foundation, if you have multiple program areas, you're not really known for something. So your voice, your platform, your ability to influence folks is diminished and sub-optimized, I think, as a result. And there's other sort of organizational reasons. So I brought that with me to the board as they asked me to take on the CEO role, and they were eager to do the same. So we thought about the most sort of existential problems for California, and between climate change, frankly, and economic disparities, economic inequity. We chose economic opportunity as the goal, and we call that our North Star. And if you parse it, it sounds like you're have some communications sort of interests and acumen. We very careful, as you can imagine, every word selected for a reason. All low-income California, all means all. So we have a commitment to ensuring that folks who have sort of specific barriers, often based on race, have access to resources, their leaders, their civic groups, their community groups that address their systemic barriers to economic opportunity. So all means all. Power to advance economically. Power is also a very consequential word. We support worker organizing groups that help bring greater power to low-income workers so they can demand better of their elected leaders and of the corporate sector, ensure that they have the resources they need, they have good jobs, they have rights and protections. So power is in there. To California, by the dint of our deed of trust, our benefactor's intent, we are exclusively focused on California, which I also appreciate because it gives you a running chance of being strategic. Most foundations, the world is your oyster. You can have a global climate program, a local arts program, et cetera. California gives us an anchor within which. So all low-income workers, power to advance economically, and California workers really define sort of who we are. And the fact that we have one goal makes us unique. For folks who are observers of philanthropy or involved, we also have no family involvement and no company involvement, which gives us a kind of sort of a degree of flexibility and nimbleness, a lack of constraints that allowed us to adopt a single focus for our work. And I think the hypothesis that it would lead to greater impact is beginning to play out. So I'm really pleased that's what we've done. And we are known now. We are known as the folks in California who invest in economic opportunity for low-income workers.
Yeah, I love it. I have a consulting practice which gave birth to the podcast. And, as a consultant, and you've been one, it's, you kind of hang up your shingle and, you need clients and you've got a certain set of skills and talents and experiences. And you're like, I could do a lot of stuff. And the success comes more and more as you narrow and say, I only do this. And those moments where, you could maybe use another client, but you say, actually don't do that. Right. Yeah. But I'd love to refer you to somebody who does. And the power of that focus and getting big by going narrow is what I hear you noticing and experiencing and leading as well.
My advice to other aspiring leaders or folks earlier in their career is as you begin to build those platforms of expertise or those areas of focus, it helps you then advance your career in ways that are strategic and can help you really have greater impact. So over time, as I started my career in commercial consulting, for-profit consulting at a big commercial firm called Booz Allen and Hamilton. And over time, sort of my journey into this is when the HIV crisis hit, my community was affected particularly unimaginably hard. And I began to do more community work and grassroots activism. You may have heard of a group called ACT UP, which is activist organization during the HIV crisis. And it was that experience that had me pivot my personal sort of passions and what my personal mission was to do work that would improve our communities and help folks get ahead. The imprint of LGBT rights sort of as you stand on the shoulders of others. And that was, the folks upon which the HIV activist movement was built. And then I saw changes, speaking of fun, Active actually did manage to build in a lot of fun into it. A lot of art was also built into it. Keith Haring had a big sort of influence on the ACT UP movement. We had protests and actions that I won't. Someday when we have a time to have a cup of coffee, I'll share some of the funnier stories. Not too far off from the sugar in the gas tank sort of experiences. But it was, that seeing a small group of people can change the world really led me to want to do that work full time. I was struggling with my expertise in consulting had been, frankly, in the oil and gas sector of all things, even more narrowly in helping to optimize profitability of convenience stores in gas stations. And I thought, I don't think I can do this.
It does not make my heart sing.
This is not, it's paying the bills, but it's not actually, speaking of paying the bills, when I had paid off my student loans is when I decided to make a career change. And the Bridgespan Group was just getting launched out of Bain & Company, which was a competitor to Booz Allen. And so I had this resume, which literally had my professional experience on one side and my civic and community experience on the other. And that is the metaphor of the bridge in Bridgespan. And I came on, I was thinking the first 30 employees and ended up leading the San Francisco office by the time I left, and had worked with 75 or so nonprofits that were either doing advocacy or direct service. And I'd say, 12 or 15 foundations on strategy, and had really begun to appreciate not just their independent challenges and what they, the decisions and the challenges they had in being strategic and impactful and efficient, but also how they worked together or in many cases didn't. So to understand what the grant seekers' experience is and the grant makers' experience is, one thing we built into our work is sort of an initiative model of grant making, where in each of our initiatives, which all relate toward economic opportunity, we have at the core a set of core grantees. And they're, each of the initiatives, we have 4 of them. There's, say, 20 or so core grantees. And we commit general operating support to those core grantees so that they have the flexibility to use the resources the way they need it. We also work with a set of core grantees to develop the impact measures. So the outcomes of the initiative over a 7-year period. So it's a very trust-based collaborative form of philanthropy, which is, trying to address, I used to call them the pathologies of philanthropy. Someday I'm going to write a book. But this power imbalance and the prescriptiveness that foundations can often apply to their grantees. And someday, again, over coffee, can share my theories as to how that came to be. But as foundations sought to be more accountable and developed sort of theories of change, which some of your listeners may know of, they began to put grantees in boxes and say, you're going to do this piece of our theory for how change occurs, which sort of sucks the locus of strategy out of the community and into the conference rooms of foundations. And I have to claim to doing some of that work when I was at Bridgespan. So I'm sort of a refugee of consulting, or a reform consultant, maybe. And I will say sometimes we do not have a theory of change at Irvine, and folks clap. I mean, it's like it's an easy crowd pleaser when making a speech, because I think so many grantees, so many nonprofit leaders have been told what to do and been given programmatic grant making, which hamstrings them and sort of takes them off mission. I remember sitting at one point when I started as executive vice president at Irvine, overseeing our grant making, and sat at one point with a grantee who had a significant grant. Everyone left the room but the two of us, which was a mistake, I think, on everyone else's part. But I asked the grantee, if you had this grant, but without the strings attached, would you do with it what we have, agreed to do? And the fellow said, absolutely not. I'd invest in my people. I would put money into R&D. I would upgrade my computers. Those are the things. And I was like, okay, there's something wrong here. I wrote a piece back when I was at Bridgespan called The Nonprofit Starvation Cycle, which tried to identify this kind of kabuki dance that foundations and nonprofits do. You tell us your overhead's 15%, we'll give you a project-based grant and you'll have to cover overhead, which is probably more like 25, and raise the other 10% somewhere else. And so we've tried very hard at Irvine to architect a form of trust-based philanthropy, which is focused, has clear outcome goals, but trust the grantees to do what they need to do. If COVID taught us anything, the world is unpredictable, and folks need the flexibility and the resources to be able to do that.
Yeah, man, so many things. I just quick shared origin story kind of thing. I was a journalist early in my career, and one thing led to another. And I was my last journalism job, I was working at an automotive magazine. So like you, I was in an industry that, first of all, the people in the auto industry are really into it. And I wasn't into it. I was kind of agnostic about oh, I'm into cars or not. But then I was like, I got into journalism to try and make the world a better place. And I'm sitting, and I had to go to cover the National Automobile Dealers Association meeting in Dallas. And I was in a workshop about maximizing profits in your service center. And I was like, okay, I think I've hit my limit. I cannot do this anymore. And like you, Don, at the same time as this was the early 90s, I was volunteering on the Barbara Boxer campaign, Dianne Feinstein, the Clinton campaign. I was volunteering at the Weingart Center in downtown Los Angeles. And, so I had this whole life going on. And so I kind of looked down, can I bridge? Thank you for that memory and that visual, can I bridge this? And I think taking my set of talents at that time, primarily, being a communicator and a writer as a journalist, and move into the sector. And so started out as a grant writer when I made that move for the first time. And then I got to say, man, love what you're talking about in terms of a lot of the promises philanthropy made over the last 5-ish years about how we were going to do things differently, which, frankly, were kind of late, in concept and short-lived in most cases. Those that are still doing it and maybe even doing it more and better, like you, thank you for that. I've got the privilege of project managing a donor collective in New York, where we've got 8 funders at 7 corporate and a CERDNA, one private foundation. And they have their only theory of change is to keep it flexible. Right. Let's be flexible. And we did that same thing. We had the grantees got to design their own measures of success. Our reporting was a 10-minute sit up. We gathered for lunch, and they got to sit and talk for 10 minutes about how it was going. And that was the report. And then my team had to turn that into something that each of the members could take back to the HQ to fill in their boxes and blanks. But the grantees didn't have to do that.
That's great.
And it feels like a continuing to give that gift to those doing the work.
Yeah, and you point to a tension. I do think this, the going back to maybe the 90s and early 2000s, the move toward greater accountability in philanthropy was a good thing. Philanthropy had been very non-transparent, not been clear how public benefit resources were being done. The fact that we get to decide where public benefit resources go as independent individuals is such a responsibility. It's also, I think, in some ways, just an oddity of American public policy. This sort of thing doesn't exist in many places. So you need to take it seriously, but you need to acknowledge that we are not proximate. We are not accountable to communities. So there has to be a way to find both a balance of being clear about what you're trying to accomplish, transparent about how you're doing it, but allowing your community leaders to lead. They are in the communities, they're responsible to their communities, not us. So I think that is a fundamental tension in philanthropy, and I'm glad to hear about this collaborative. And I have a lot of respect for CERDNA. Don Shedden and CERDNA is marvelous.
Yeah, it's pretty fun to have these big corporates. And then, those of us that know CERDNA from coming in from the philanthropic side, are like so glad to see how they can influence the 7 corporates that are around the table, who don't necessarily come to it with the mandate to be as innovative as CERDNA is, and that really flavors the group. Hey, let's talk about your California perspective, right? How do you think having it's a big place.
Right.
To call it focused might not exactly be exactly on point, but how does it help you feel that you've got agency as the leader, and then giving your people the power and agency to help affect change and support change makers in a specific place? And how is that different than if there was no boundary geographically to your work?
Well, you're right to say California, state of 40 million folks, depending on the day, 4th largest economy in the world. California is not as many places. It's not, a monolith. You have regions that, California really is the story of many regions. It's also a story of 2 states, and that there is a very affluent part of California. And then there are some really struggling communities. I think it was a survey we support at the Public Policy Institute of California. 70% of Californians polled don't believe that their children are going to do better than they do. Wow. And that is the essence of the California dream. And it is no longer, at least, and in fact, the data would show, it is no longer available to Californians. So our job is to support folks who are reclaiming the California dream and the American dream, and giving folks a ladder to opportunity, which is really what made California a mecca in the first place. So I think our focus, as sort of is appropriate, really is anchored around the essence of California and the California dream. It is very timely given the conditions in California, though California is, as goes California, so goes the nation. So there is a component of what we do that I think really has impact on the rest of the country, though we're not designed to do that. We didn't set ourselves up to do that. We have one initiative which is place-based. Our other initiatives are statewide. So we've also sort of architecturally acknowledged that California isn't one place, but it actually is many places. So we have our initiative, which is called Priority Communities, which does deeper work in 6 places: Salinas, Stockton, Merced, Fresno, San Bernardino on Riverside. I think I did that north to south. And in those places, we support collaboratives that include civic leaders, community groups, educational leaders, electeds, businesses, to plan for their economies to be more inclusive and equitable. And this is actually, I won't bore you with the history of it, but it has been sort of an emerging thread of sort of regions up economic development. The sort of notion of just transition work sort of has been out there. It was quickly understood in California that it wasn't one just transition. You had regions that were going to move, and this was sort of provoked by climate change. But now we can think of it in terms of, any number of different changing contextual factors, AI being a big one, for instance. It's going to affect the regions differently. So these collaboratives come together and plan for the kind of economic growth that benefits everyone. It's not just the folks at the Chamber of Commerce, frankly, or the developers who have the land who get to decide what happens next, but the coalitions and these collaboratives do. The state, we funded two regions who were wanted to do this, one Fresno, one the Inland Empire, and their model became it was adopted by the state in an effort called California Jobs First. So it was scaled. I mean, we talk about philanthropy, how you want something locally to scale. And so these two communities became the model for a statewide program that they resourced at about $600 million for 13 regions to do this sort of planning. And now those plans folks are investing in. The unfortunate circumstance is that the resources to do big development projects have decreased. The state's budget is in deficit, and the federal government is retrenching from the kind of investments that would have really helped. But that ups the ante for us as private organizations to fund the kind of at least pre-development work to help these projects get off the ground. One example is in Fresno, the collaborative identified an area they wanted to move into food innovation. As you know, around Fresno, agricultural region, climate change is requiring changes in growing patterns. The drought required fallowing farmland. So they wanted to move into food innovation. They were able to compete and get a grant from the Biden administration for the Build Back Better Regional Challenge. And they got $60 million to build the Fresno Food Innovation Center, I think innovation project. I've butchered the name, but it was a great example too of taking, I think we might have supported their planning effort to the tune of $1.5 million. That led to a $60 million federal grant and the state putting a $600 million project together for everyone to participate in the same thing. So that regional work is really important. It does scale up to the full state, which is, I think, a cool aspect of it. But it acknowledges that Fresno is really different than the Inland Empire. If you're living in a place like the Inland Empire, which is rife with warehouses, nothing against warehouses. I'm an Amazon customer myself. I'm sure most of us are. But the primary direction of development has been logistics and warehousing. Those are not great jobs, and they're not jobs that are likely, at least at this scale, to be around much longer. So they want to move into new areas that have higher value jobs and can create economic opportunity for everyone. So that's how we do our regional work. I do think what we've been able to do as a state-based funder is to build relationships with statewide organizations and the governor's office. Yeah. So we do a lot of public-private partnership work with the governor's office. And I think if we weren't state-based, and if we weren't known as folks who invest in economic justice and economic equity, it would be harder to find those partnership opportunities. So the state focus has also helped there in terms of how we collaborate with state leaders.
Yeah, I was thinking the state focus and also the kind of the issue area focus that you chose around economic development, economic opportunity, and advancement economically helps you build your expertise, and you're known as that. And so when you're not just like broadly like a do-gooder, right? You're like, no, they're like do-gooders in a certain area, right? And we can bring them in because they're studying this, right, all the time. I love that. And, especially with, lawmakers, come and go, that's, one of the reasons lobbyists have so much power. And right, rightfully so. They're in on the issue, right? And they're there all the time, and they don't come and go. And similarly, folks like yourselves can be continuity, even in the midst of lots of change. I know we need to eat some ice cream, and we need to talk a little more about play, and we need to talk about AI. But I love, just real quick, how prescriptive or perhaps not were you in whatever characteristics these collaboratives needed to have, all of them, or mandate you gave all of them? How did you frame up those? Was it 6 or 9? Sorry.
So we're in 6 communities.
6 communities. What were the marching orders for those 6? How similar or dissimilar?
Well, none actually.
Yeah.
The collaborative model that was called Fresno Drive and one called IEGO, Inland Empire Growth and Opportunity. Those were two collaboratives that came to us for funding. We
Mm.
didn't go to them. And there are, and I think successful, some less so, philanthropic place-based efforts where a funder comes in.
Yeah.
And I was involved in this as a
There's a
consultant.
feeding frenzy.
And, well, they were like, okay, we're going to do this. We have a model for how community change should occur, and therefore, here's a grant application or a contest to get some money. We don't do that. So when as we saw the organic evolution of this sort of planning work, we said this makes a ton of sense, and that became the model that's kind of fundamental to our Priority Communities initiative. But we didn't tell them what to do. Now that doesn't mean we don't partner closely and collaborate, particularly in the place-based work where you get to know the players and you become, and we're, I'm sure, the largest philanthropic funder in Fresno, for instance. So folks know who we are. So the collaborative model is important. An area it comes up, I can think of, I won't name names, but one where a group needed some mediation resources. Two of the collaborative members were not getting along, and they were applying for some grants, and they weren't going to get them if they couldn't get together. So in collaboration, we said, this is a small investment for us, and it can be quite helpful. So we supported some mediation between the two groups. So we don't prescribe these collaboratives. They were organic. We have helped them sort of in these regions with the state resources scale and be able to do the work more broadly. But again, we're only in 6 communities. And I argue, even if the state's divvies things up in many ways, but there's far more than 6 communities that need the resources in California. So, I wish we had more and could get into more regions, but the place-based work is, and then it rolls up to the state work, which is, I think, how the model, for us should work.
I had this vision once when there was that whole heyday in the kind of middle 2000s, early 2000s around place-based work, and different foundations were choosing cities and saying, here, we're coming with it. And I remember thinking, what if we turn the table? So let's launch this idea, Dawn. What if we turn the tables, and what if a community issued an RFP to the national foundations and said, would you like to compete for the opportunity to come in and do work with us in our town, city, or locale? And I don't know, maybe that could.
I love the idea. I can see, immediately my mind goes to all the reasons why that would be challenging to do, but we'll find that, another topic for coffee is
we're going to have so much coffee.
To be disruptors in philanthropy.
Love it. Let's go get your ice cream. And I'm going to remind folks about our ice cream sponsor, Taharka Brothers, social enterprise, employee-owned ice cream company based in Baltimore. And I suspect, Dawn, you received 6 pints in a hot pink box?
6 pints. And as I mentioned earlier, one has been consumed to my chagrin, but I will go get the next and bring
Excellent.
it on.
All right, I'm going to grab mine. Okay, so yeah, I do. So folks, Taharka sends, they ship nationwide. They're based in Baltimore. You can get them at the retail level in Maryland, but if you're elsewhere, like we are, we're both in California, they will send it to you nationwide delivery. And I do have to tell my guests in advance, please save 1 pint. So Dawn, the only ate one is actually noteworthy, because sometimes I just say, please save one, right? So which one did you choose to enjoy this morning?
The one last night was the cookie dough. The one I just picked up is called Cup of Joe, which I'm guessing is a coffee, and it looks like chocolate chip and flavored ice cream. And
I love it. And I think, that's a nice nod to the morning hour, a little coffee flavored ice cream. And I'm having what is, I think, the most popular flavor on the podcast has been honey graham, which I hope you have a pint of it. Okay. And then this is salted honey graham, which is a salted caramel ice cream with with graham cracker, like crust. It's amazing. And
the best part of waking up, right?
My God. So you told a little of your origin story, talking about the AIDS epidemic and when you were working at Booz Allen. I ask when we eat ice cream, what's the scoop on how you came to care? So you shared that story. Do you even have a younger one, maybe as a young person, as a kid, kind of having a sense of the world being bigger than just you and your family, perhaps, or the folks on your street?
Yeah, and I think I grew up with a sort of chip on my shoulder and a desire to sort of make right for underdogs. Single mom, 2 kids. Yeah, my mom worked really hard to put food on the table. And I grew up, I think, matured pretty young, growing up gay, and I had just a lot of negative experiences, a lot of bullying, a lot of uh, folks sort of diminishing me in various ways. And from an early age, I thought, I'm going to show these folks. And it was such an impetus for how I performed in school and community work that I did. I remember sounds like a brag, but I was valedictorian in my class. And I had been a bit of a rebel in addition to being a leader in my high school and the rest, which, by the way, I was voted class clown. For the bonus podcast.
I gotta pause. Okay, this is a total playful podcast moment, the juxtaposition and the duality of class clown valedictorian. Thank you, John.
And because I was also editor of the newspaper, and we had done some provocative stories. It's Catholic high school of all things. Yeah, and I really reveled in that dichotomy. And when it came time for me to make my speech, they insisted on reviewing and approving the remarks I was going to make. And I tell you, there was, for a brief moment, I remember there was one family that I'd been in school with the kid since first grade. And I remember hearing that this kid was told not to play with me because I came from a broken home and I was gay. I'm sure the word was not as polite at the time. And I remember thinking that parent's going to be in the audience. And here I am. And I would love to say something like, hey, maybe you were wrong about that in terms of your kid. But I also decided that there were, my class was small, it was 150 folks. It was their day and I didn't want to ruin it. So I kept it aspirational. But I think this is the genesis of why I've wanted to sort of right wrongs in the world. And what a privilege to have the opportunity to do it. I think, God, just so much privilege. And I'd say good fortune. I think, when good luck meets opportunity is when you have good fortune. So I'm sorry, let me reframe that. It's when good preparation meets opportunity that you have good fortune. And I feel like I did prepare myself well, but then a lot of good things fell into place in terms of opportunities. I was the first kid in my high school to get into Stanford in 12 years. So, that was somebody in some admissions office somewhere said, hey, I'll make a bet on this guy. Yeah. And that's a kind of sort of a number of things like that fell into place that have helped me get into the role I'm in. I hope that preparation's also allowed me to be a good leader and make good decisions and lead the organization in good directions. But it really did start as a kid, and me, both with my sort of being in a single parent household and being gay, I think propelled me to want to do the work that I'm doing.
Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. This feels like a funny segue, but I want to make sure we hit it before we depart. You recently co-authored an op-ed with Mike, and how do you pronounce Mike's last name?
Kubzansky.
Yeah, Kubzansky from Omidyar about AI. And interestingly, lots of course talk about AI and AI equity and all of that, specifically around the role workers need to have, should have, can insist on, and can philanthropy facilitate in what's going on with AI versus just like, well, we're going to all watch and see which of us lose jobs. I think I'm understanding from the piece when I read it, you're saying philanthropy can hone in on the power dynamic and power conversation around AI and workers. What do you want to leave us with thinking about that?
So a couple things that key on from what you said. The op-ed was to encourage other funders to focus on empowering workers to have a say in the deployment of AI in their jobs. We also talk about, a lot of folks talk about AI and work or AI and jobs. We talk about AI and workers.
Yeah.
And again, back to having a singular focus on low-income
Yes.
workers, we see through that lens, a lot of low-income workers' jobs will be changed, either augmented or possibly eliminated by AI. And it's really AI plus automation. If you think about warehousing as an example. So what we've been doing is kind of a sort of early, try to get our bearings here, is funding organizations like our worker group so they can get smarter about artificial intelligence and how it's going to affect them. So speaking of logistics, one of our grantees, the Warehouse Workers Resource Center, we made a grant to them so they can begin to get more engaged themselves in advocating around AI policy, and particularly in the logistics and warehousing world. We've also been funding advocacy groups who are trying to bring the voice of workers into the debate. California has actually been a leader in AI regulation. Just a couple laws were signed in the last few days. So we've been supporting advocacy efforts, and we've been looking for and just beginning to scratch the surface of opportunities for partnerships between employers and workers to deploy AI in a job. Now, you have to ensure the worker that if they're going to collaborate, they're not going to lose their job. But we're supporting a group called One Fair Wage, which works with restaurant workers, and they have some partner restaurateurs who want to collaborate with workers to experiment with AI in the restaurant sector. So in the best of all worlds, then there's even some research. I was at a conference recently. There's research that shows workers, and by involving workers in the deployment of AI, you're going to get better AI.
Yeah.
That folks who really know how the job works need to be informing the design, or you're going to have a tool that doesn't really serve the purpose. If we're going to move to this as we do move through this revolution in technology, if it's going to work for low-income workers, they need to be at the table, and they need to have power at that table, not just be sitting there, but be able to say, we are going to insist. You look at the Writers Guild, and the contract they negotiated has a clause around deployment of AI in the writers' room. And that's been, I think, a very good example. And there's now a lot of union contract language to try to get at this, because we're going to go through this, whether we wish it or not. And tech revolutions in the past, the old saw goes, well, some jobs get eliminated, but new jobs get created, which is true. But the folks in the old jobs don't necessarily get the new jobs.
Yeah.
And so we have this transition window within which we need to empower workers to have a say in how this happens, so that they're not, frankly, the coal workers or steel workers of this generation. And, I do argue to folks that focusing on economic empowerment is really getting at some of the need for healing in our democracy, that some of the, I believe, grievance politics that's leading to the divisions we have is fueled by folks feeling like they've been left behind.
Yeah.
And AI has the potential to do that on steroids, or do that even more. And if we want to bring our democracy to a healthier state, want to bring folks back together, we need to make sure that the AI revolution doesn't create a whole new generation of folks who are struggling.
Yeah. Wow. Great point. The fear and feelings associated with that, that are universal, right? And not wanting to be left behind and wanting to be able to provide for our kids, all of that. Great confluence there. I love it. Okay. So parting words. Do you have any call to action for you pick your audience, Californians, workers, philanthropy? What do you want to leave us with?
Well, let me do this for other philanthropists. I want to be careful. Our grantees' voices should be the voices that are lifted up in terms of a call for action for low-income workers. But for other philanthropists, I'd encourage folks to think about supporting, having a people-focused strategy, and listening, hearing, and supporting the aspirations of people living in our communities. I think we can become very abstract in the way philanthropy defines the issues they're trying to address. Again, back to our North Star, we focused on people. You can talk to people. You can hear from folks whether things are working or not. If you don't have a clear constituency that you're seeking to serve, you'll never know. You can kick the can down the road, and anything will be a good grant. So my encouragement to philanthropy is to think about focus and to think about people-centered philanthropy and to think about how to trust grantees. They're proximate, they're accountable, they know what needs to be done. Give them the resources, collaborate on ensuring that you have some measures of accountability, but do your best to get out of the way once you've made the grants to folks.
Love it. Okay. Well, I think between the coffee and ice cream that we're going to have together, we will probably be able to cover many more subjects in future meetings, in-person meetings. I will look forward to it. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your dedication to the state of California and the people and the workers of California. It's going to be exciting to see how you continue to lead while bringing fun to the serious work of changing the world. So thanks, Don.
Thank you for having me.
It was great. Thank you. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for listening to the PlayFull Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and review it on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you know of a leader or organization that's doing good in the world and you'd love to help us help them amplify their message, I would love to have them on the show. Go to the show notes and click there, or go to impactfulinc.com/contact. And that's impactful with 2 L's, inc.com/contact. And let us know who you're thinking about. Can't wait to see you next time.